I'm back with Bob Manning, author of In the Midst of a Recall. In our previous episode, we were talking about proactive approaches to recalls. We're going to flip the conversation to look at reactive uh, approaches. And I want to start off by saying that, most recalls really depend on external data, data information, if you will, external to a company. You typically don't see recalls until there's information from an inspector, or most likely public health information. You have people that have been hospitalized or worse because of a failure that is kind of triggering the need to do a recall. We saw this a lot in 2024 with Boar's Head and with the Taylor Farms E. coli and their onions, and with those carrots towards the end of the year as well. Let's talk about reactive approach. Bob, first off, how do you define reactive?
Well, it's one of those things that you didn't prepare for, and all of a sudden, like what we had experienced, it felt like just like a bomb was dropped on us. And so now everyone's scrambling. It's chaotic, it's unorganized, and you go in so many different directions. And so, which hence everyone focuses, although they talk about focusing on the proactive approach, which is very systematic and organized and in control. Reactive to me has always been more chaotic. It's been less systematic, and it's been certainly less efficient. And it takes longer for you to come out with the end result as opposed to following the proactive and preventative side of things. So yeah, it's just very chaotic. That's how I look at reactivity.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about, it could be people are sick, people are losing their jobs. It could be
Yeah.
we need to bring in external eyes on things. We need to look at uh, different sets of numbers. So obviously, we're trying to do some root cause analysis to try to figure out what happened. You may have leadership now that is taking on some different challenges and being more physically present in a facility, looking at certain things. And I do want to frame the conversation. A reactive approach to a recall. I mean, this literally could be due to a natural disaster. It could be due to a
Mhm.
labeling issue. It could be due to a failure in sanitation, as we've seen. So there are a lot of different reasons, but when a recall is declared, the classes of recall pertain to how people are likely to be harmed. They don't
Right.
depend, the classes of recall don't depend on the cause necessarily.
Right. That's right.
So I would imagine that the minute you hear a recall and you're working for a company and now there's a recall of your product, you would want to start by assuming the worst case scenario.
Right. And you also brought up a great point is when you look at, people's lives are something at risk, right? I mean, the level of risk is to be determined. But when you're facing a recall, the question becomes, how do I protect the consumer? Although, I mean, that's how I look at it, right? I know everyone doesn't look at it that way. Some people are like, how do we protect the company? But I always look at how do we protect the consumer? And so first and foremost, you need to get that product off the shelf as quickly as you can. And from a reactive perspective, and I would highly encourage companies to look at this, is who's going to do that, right? Who's going to go get your product? And some companies will do it, some retailers will do it, some retailers may not do it. And so you should have some communications or some contacts. Like if you were to have a recall, these are the people that I need to call right now. And one of them is a company that removes product from your shelves and disposes of it or holds it until it's ready for disposal and doesn't ship it back to your plant because I've seen that as well. It's like, okay, we got it off the shelf and now it's coming back to the plant. It's like, no, 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 I don't want it because now I'm intermixing it with good product. But from a reactive perspective, like that, for me, that's the first thing. How do I protect the consumer? And then there's other pieces beyond that. But
Yeah, we often hear, 7 million pounds is recalled, but way down the road, you'll find out that maybe 20% of that was actually recovered.
Right.
And
Exactly.
there's different reasons. I have seen scenarios where, well, very remote convenience stores went to a Walmart and bought up stuff or to
Mhm.
a Costco and bought up stuff, and they weren't really paying attention to recalls, and they were
Right.
still selling the product that they broke down into smaller packages, because they bought it in bulk.
Hmm. Yeah.
Or
Right.
I've seen scenarios where just over 10 years ago, there was a recall that was requested by the USDA at a major I'm sorry, a major retail company, and the manager was like, "Well, we haven't had any complaints, so I don't think I need to take it off the shelves."
Yep.
And they continued to sell the product for a long time until literally there was an 8-year-old who died, and they had the proof. Here was the pathogen, and it was tied to this. And if you had
Yep.
not, if you had taken it off the shelves when we asked you to, you could have prevented this young boy's death.
Right.
And what really sticks with me is not only that decision by that manager's uh, hand, if you will, but the fact that the family that owns that retail chain was devastated. They're like, why
Sure.
was this not elevated to the next level? And so
Right.
they went and they revisited their protocols and said that if any one location gets a recall notification, it has to go to the corporate level because we want to
Right.
make sure that there's complete action taken in this reaction to this letter. And this is a big company, and here they were
Sure.
still. Now, they were on the retail side revisiting their policies and protocols as a
Hmm.
result of this. And they weren't even the cause of why it
Right.
had to be recalled in the first place.
Right. When you were saying that, it made me think about a situation that I was in as well. So, you have people that may take the product off the shelves for you, and it's really understanding that destruction process. So I had gone through one where I actually had asked somebody on my team to go to the dump and literally watch this stuff get destroyed. It got ran over by a steamroller. And it was actually a protocol that someone had put in place. And I always question, like, this is ridiculous. Like, why would we do this? Well, fast forward a couple years later, I was involved in an investigation. And sure enough, that company didn't have those protocols in place. And I wasn't brought in until after the fact. Well, what had happened was the company pulled the product from the shelves and it went to a destruction company, but it was actually resold on a gray market. And so then there was complaints coming in from regions that this wasn't even sold at. So it was like, how does this? And then through the tracing process, that's where it was identified. So it's like you're absolutely right. It's getting that communication out, but then making sure that you're dealing with it, or like you're destroying it, or you have a reputable company that is taking care of that. Because nothing could be worse than having a recall. You get everything off the shelf, and then it's sold in some other marketplace, and somebody gets sick or dies. Like that's got to be. I mean, it doesn't. It's all bad, but that's really bad, right? Because you did all the right things, and then there was a gap in your process.
Well, I don't think people realize too, I mean, we talk about data and digitalization and stuff. I remember it wasn't too many years back when there was a soy nut peanut butter that was recalled, and the company ended up going out of business. But
Mhm.
for a long time afterwards, people were able to buy the product on Amazon.
Sure. Yeah.
And it's like, okay, doesn't a SKU number, doesn't a
Right.
QR code or whatever trigger hey, this has been recalled and you can't sell this online?
Right.
And so it just goes to show how important it is to make sure that the product truly is recalled and destroyed.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely right.
Um, but being reactive, right? I want to flip the script a little bit here. Yes, it's important to look at the idea of actually removing the products from the shelves, if you will, and
Mhm.
destroying them. But a lot of conversations I have are about the communication, people being
Mhm.
critical of the idea of how did I not know, or how do people know, or how is it that this company does a better job of communicating than that company? What are your thoughts in terms of the reactive approach now, beyond the food safety team, even beyond the legal team, but looking at the marketing and PR?
Mhm. Yeah, I think, when you're the communication, like when you talk about businesses, like every business will identify communication's an issue, right? It doesn't matter what business it is. And so it really comes down to how communications are allowed or not allowed. I mean, I've been in companies where it's like, well, I don't want you to say this, or I'm sure people watching this will laugh because I think there's people in organizations where, hey, we're going to have a pre-meeting to talk about what we're going to talk about in the meeting. And right. And so it's when you don't have that candor and you don't have that level of psychological safety, everything gets suppressed. And what happens is it gets suppressed to the level of when there's an issue, you'll hear people say, "Oh, I knew about that," or "I had seen that. I just didn't say anything." And I think it's when you start getting the level at all levels. And again, it goes back like I know I've been pretty critical in the past about senior leadership or the CEO level. They have to drive it, right? They have to be the ones to say, this is what we will allow and this is what we won't allow. But it's also important for that leader to be open enough to listen to what their team is telling them and be able to have an open mindset to say, okay, and I've been guilty of this at various levels. It's like, I'm hearing what you're telling me, but no, this is what we're gonna do. We're gonna go down this path. And sometimes I'm right and sometimes I'm wrong. But it's never been around the food safety side. I've always relied on that collaborative approach. But then once that decision is made, everybody's in full alignment and that communication ripples through the organization to say, this is how we're going to do it. And so when you look on, to your point, on the outside or the external side or the legal components of it, for me, it's always been truthful. It's always been truthful, genuine, and sincere about what we're talking about. Now, you're going to get people in the audiences that are going to try to trip you up and ask you questions that, make you stumble. But if you go with what is right, and if you communicate what your true plans are, not some fabricated pie in the sky checklist of things we're going to do, if you're honest with people, and everybody knows when you're being honest with them, right? If you're honest with them and say, look, this is what we're doing, and it's okay to say, I don't know. Like I actually talk about that in the book. Through growing up in food manufacturing, I mean, I had some pretty harsh leaders that said, you better always have an answer. Like you better be that good to where you always know the answer. Well, in today's day and age, there's so much information you have to know. And the reality of that is it's not truthful. Like you can't do that. So, but but you got very good at answering questions. Sometimes they weren't 100% accurate. But what I had learned through this process and through the communication, and after being grilled by countless attorneys, they said, look, pause before you talk, make sure what you deliver is clear and is accurate. And if you don't know, it's okay to say, I don't know. Let me look into that. So, especially when you're dealing with the outside, I mean, everybody's recording everything, right? And so they're taking notes. They're like, I remember going through the process, stuff that I remember the legal team sliding stuff over years later saying, you got to review this docket or you got to review this information. It's like, I don't even know when this is from. Like the last 2 years was all in front of me in a big binder, like everything I wrote. And they said, you got to go through this. And so, all that was for me to understand some of the things were accurate, some of them weren't. They were never malicious. There was never malicious intent, but it was always around, I have to answer the question. But you don't always have to answer that question. It's okay if you don't know, and then coming back with information later. So, I think as you go through your organization and as teams engage with employees on the floor, it's okay to say, I don't know. Don't fabricate something that you can't do or you won't do.
Yeah, that differentiation between saying the right thing and doing the right thing.
Mhm.
And talking about recalls, do you remember the whole Tylenol scare way back in the day?
Yeah, yeah.
And what's crazy is Tylenol came out of that with a great reputation based on how they reacted,
Mhm.
how they,
Yeah.
flew private jets around and made sure everything was recalled and how they
Yep.
took ownership. And it wasn't even their problem, right? I mean,
Right.
it wasn't their fault, excuse me.
Right. Right.
Um,
Yeah.
and And yet we can look at examples. We don't even have to go back 10 years to look at examples where it's like, avoid conversation that could make it sound like you're assuming liability or blame or whatever, and
Mhm.
blame other people and
Yep.
deny and deny, deny, deny. And you sometimes see corporate executives, how
Mhm.
dare the health department say this, or how dare the people use the data to point this out, or
Right.
and it's like, okay, you can deny and avoid as long as you want, but the reality is history,
Right.
and you will be judged, or at least remembered for when you prioritized your company uh, profits and needs
Right.
over doing the right thing.
Right. Yeah, it's a great topic because I touch on it in the book. I actually talk about Tylenol in the very beginning for that reason. It people don't won't remember what happened through the recall process, but they will remember how you led them and they'll remember how you dealt with them. And so here you're dealing with like the worst of the worst case. And as leaders and people that are leading these initiatives and being actively involved, it's really a matter of being as calm as you can be. And as I think about the best leaders I've ever worked for, they were the most calm people. Like I didn't fear of giving them bad news because they weren't going to blow up on me. They were going to say, okay, this is what we're going to do. Like very calm. And I have friends that have been in the special forces and they are the most calm people. Not what you would think, right? They think through the process and they decide and then they act on that decision. And so, us as leaders, that's the best approach. And that's what's going to drive not only better information and better communication flow, but it's also going to help make them better leaders as well.
And that is very important.
Agreed.
Bob, let's come back and talk about another aspect of your book, preventative.
Sounds good.
Great. Thank you very
Thank you.
much.